The gunshot shattered the silence of the Seoul night before Chelsea could even scream. Glass exploded around her as she threw herself to the marble floor of the penthouse, her pregnant belly pressed against the cold stone, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might rupture. Above her, Hyun-woo's father, the man whose child she carried, the man she had sworn she would never love, returned fire with the calm precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, his silver hair catching the moonlight as bullets tore through the luxurious space that had become her gilded cage. This was not how her story was supposed to end, bleeding out in a foreign country, caught between a father and son who both claimed ownership of her soul. But here she was, 6 months pregnant with a secret that would destroy an empire, and the only man who could save her was the one she should have run from the moment their eyes first met. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your country. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Chelsea Adeyemi had learned early in life that survival required flexibility, that sometimes you bent until you nearly broke, and that pride was a luxury women like her could not afford. At 26 years old, she had already buried her parents, raised her younger brother through his teenage years, and worked 3 jobs in Lagos to keep them both alive. When the opportunity came to work as a translator for a Korean investment firm expanding into West Africa, she had seized it with both hands, ignoring the warnings from friends who said nothing good ever came from desperation. The job had brought her to Seoul 6 months ago, and within weeks, she had caught the attention of the wrong people, or perhaps, looking back now, exactly the right people, depending on how you measured fate and destruction. Park Hyun-woo was the kind of beautiful that hurt to look at directly, like staring into the sun. 29 years old, impeccably dressed, with the kind of smile that made you forget he could order your death before his morning coffee grew cold. He was the heir to the Park crime family, one of the most powerful mafia organizations in East Asia, though of course, she had not known that when he first approached her at a corporate event, offering her champagne and compliments in perfect English. Their courtship had been a whirlwind, so intense it left her dizzy. Within 2 months, they were married in a private ceremony that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration of love, but Chelsea had told herself that love could grow, that Hyun-woo's occasional coldness was just the stress of his responsibilities, that the way he sometimes looked at her like she was a possession he had acquired rather than a person he cherished was simply a cultural difference she did not yet understand. She had been wrong about so many things. The Park family compound was a fortress disguised as a mansion, sprawling across a hillside on the outskirts of Seoul, surrounded by walls that seemed designed to keep people in as much as to keep threats out. Chelsea had moved in 3 weeks after the wedding, her few belongings looking pathetic in the enormous bedroom she was expected to share with Hyun-woo, though he rarely slept there, preferring to spend his nights in what he called his office, but what she suspected was another woman's bed. It was in that mansion, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life, that she first truly met Park Jae-sung. Jae-sung was 52 years old, though he could have passed for 40 with his disciplined physique and the kind of presence that made every room feel smaller when he entered it. He was the patriarch of the Park family, the man who had built their empire from the ground up through blood and brilliance, and he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. His hair was silver at the temples, his face marked with the kind of scars that spoke of a violent past, and his eyes, dark and impossibly deep, seemed to see through every defense Chelsea had ever built around her heart. Their first real conversation happened in the library on a rainy afternoon in November. Chelsea had been crying, though she had thought she was alone, mourning the death of the future she had imagined for herself, the slow realization that Hyun-woo did not love her and perhaps never would, that she was nothing more than a trophy he had won to prove something to himself or to his father or to the world. Jae-sung had appeared like a ghost, materializing in the doorway with a cup of tea he wordlessly offered her, and when she tried to apologize for her tears, he had simply said, "A woman who does not cry in this house is either dead inside or lying to herself, and you strike me as neither." They had talked for 3 hours that day, about everything and nothing, her childhood in Lagos, his own youth in Busan before the family had moved to Seoul, the weight of expectations neither of them had asked for, the loneliness that came with living in a world where trust was a currency too expensive for most people to afford. He did not try to touch her or seduce her, did not treat her like the mistake his son had made, and for the first time since arriving in Korea, Chelsea felt like she could breathe. It became a pattern. Afternoons in the library, conversations that stretched into evenings, a friendship that felt dangerous precisely because it felt so safe. Jae-sung was everything his son was not, attentive, thoughtful, genuinely interested in her thoughts and dreams, and as the weeks passed, Chelsea found herself looking forward to those stolen hours with an intensity that terrified her. She told herself it was innocent, that she was simply lonely, that Jae-sung was being kind to his daughter-in-law out of a sense of duty or perhaps pity. She told herself these lies even as her heart began to race whenever she heard his footsteps in the hallway, even as she started dressing more carefully on the days she knew he would be home, even as she caught herself touching her hair and laughing at his stories in a way that felt too much like flirting. The night everything changed was unseasonably warm for December. Hyunwoo had been gone for 5 days on what he called business, but what Chelsea knew was probably a vacation with whatever woman currently held his interest, and she had been sitting in the garden, staring at the koi pond and wondering how much longer she could survive in a marriage that was slowly suffocating her. Jae-sung had found her there, and without asking permission, he had sat beside her on the stone bench, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker, more complex. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the fish move through the water like living jewels, and then, so quietly she almost missed it, he said, "You deserve better than what my son is giving you." Chelsea had turned to look at him, and the expression on his face had stolen the breath from her lungs. It was naked hunger, barely restrained desire, and something else she could not name but recognized in the deepest parts of herself, the same ache she felt whenever she was near him, the same impossible longing for something she could never have. "Don't," she had whispered, though she was not sure if she was warning him or begging him. "Don't what?" Jae-sung had asked, and his hand had moved to her face, cupping her cheek with a gentleness that made her want to weep. "Don't tell you the truth? Don't touch you the way I have wanted to touch you since the first day I saw you crying in my library? Don't love you?" The word love had hung between them like a blade, and Chelsea knew she should pull away, should run back to the safety of her empty bedroom, should remember that this man was her father-in-law, that what she was feeling was not just inappropriate but catastrophically dangerous. But when Jae-sung leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, soft and questioning, she had not pulled away. She had kissed him back. That first kiss had led to a second, and then a third, and before Chelsea fully understood what was happening, they were stumbling into his private quarters, tearing at each other's clothes with the desperation of people who had been starving for too long. Jae-sung had made love to her with an intensity that left her trembling, whispering her name like a prayer, touching her like she was something precious and rare, and for the first time in her marriage, in her life, Chelsea felt truly seen, truly wanted, truly loved. They both knew it was wrong. They both knew it could not last. But in that moment, tangled in each other's arms, they chose to pretend that consequences did not exist, that the world outside those four walls would never intrude, that love, real, desperate, impossible love, was enough. It was not enough. It never was. The affair continued in secret for 3 months, hidden in the shadows of the enormous mansion, stolen moments that felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Jae-sung would find excuses to be alone with Chelsea, a discussion about household matters, a request for her opinion on a business deal, a chance encounter in the hallway that led to frantic kisses in empty rooms. She knew it was madness, knew that discovery would mean death for both of them, but she could not stop, could not force herself to walk away from the only source of happiness she had found in this cold, cruel country. Hyunwoo remained oblivious, too absorbed in his own affairs and his position as heir to notice that his wife and his father were falling deeper into each other with every passing day. He treated Chelsea with the same casual indifference he always had, acknowledging her presence only when it benefited him, using her as arm candy at family events, and otherwise leaving her to her own devices. It suited Chelsea just fine, though sometimes she felt a stab of guilt when she caught Hyunwoo looking at her across the dinner table, wondering if some part of him suspected, if some instinct warned him that his father was stealing what should have been his. But guilt was a luxury she could not afford, not when Jae-sung looked at her like she hung the moon, not when his touch made her forget every rule she had ever learned about right and wrong. The pregnancy came as a shock, though in retrospect, Chelsea realized they had been careless, too drunk on each other to think about consequences. She discovered it in late February, staring at the positive test in her bathroom with her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. The timing was impossible to mistake. She and Hyunwoo had not been intimate in over 4 months, not since before the affair began, which meant there was absolutely no question about who the father was. She told Jae-sung that night, finding him in his study, and she watched the color drain from his face as he processed the information. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Chelsea felt her heart breaking, convinced he was going to end things, going to tell her to get rid of the baby and disappear from his life forever. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "We will figure this out," he said. "I will protect you, both of you, no matter what it costs me." It was a promise he would spend the next 3 months desperately trying to keep. The first complication came from an unexpected source. Jung-hwa, Jae-sung's younger brother and the family's consigliere, had always been perceptive, his eyes missing nothing, and he began watching Chelsea and Jae-sung with an intensity that made Chelsea's skin crawl. She caught him staring at her growing belly during family dinners, saw the way his gaze would shift between her and Jae-sung, calculating, weighing, judging. 2 weeks after Chelsea told Jae-sung about the pregnancy, Jung-hwa cornered her in the hallway, his smile cold and dangerous. "Does my nephew know he is about to become a father?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. "Or should I say, does he know that his father is about to become one again?" Chelsea's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice shook, and Jung-hwa's smile widened. "You are a terrible liar, Chelsea," he said, stepping closer, invading her space in a way that made her want to run. "I have been watching you and my brother for weeks now, and I see everything. The way he looks at you. The way you disappear into his quarters. The way you are glowing with something that has nothing to do with Hyunwoo's cold touch. What do you want?" Chelsea asked, forcing herself to meet his eyes even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. Jung-hwa's expression turned thoughtful, almost amused. "That depends," he said. "How much is my silence worth to you?" "To him. Because I promise you, if Hyunwoo finds out what you two have been doing, if he learns that the child you are carrying belongs to his father, he will burn this entire family to the ground, and he will start with you." Before Chelsea could respond, Jae-sung appeared at the end of the hallway, his presence immediately shifting the energy in the space. "Leave her alone, Jung-hwa," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, and his brother backed away with a knowing smirk. "Just offering congratulations," Jung-hwa said lightly. "After all, it is not every day a man becomes a grandfather and a father at the same time." The threat hung in the air long after he walked away, and that night, Jae-sung made the decision that would set everything in motion. "We need to leave," he told Chelsea, pacing his study like a caged animal. "Take you somewhere safe, somewhere Hyunwoo cannot reach you, and then I will handle my brother and deal with the consequences." But leaving proved impossible. The Park family had eyes everywhere, and Jae-sung's every move was watched by people loyal to Hyunwoo, by soldiers who saw the patriarch as a relic of a dying era and his son as the future. 2 attempts to smuggle Chelsea out of the compound failed, and after the second, Jae-sung received a message that made his blood run cold. A photograph of Chelsea's younger brother in Lagos, standing outside his university, oblivious to the man in the background pointing a camera at him. The message was clear. If they ran, people Chelsea loved would die. The second complication came from an external threat. The Choi family, a rival organization based in Incheon, had been encroaching on Park territory for months, and tensions were reaching a breaking point. Hyunwoo, eager to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy, had been pushing for war, advocating for aggressive retaliation that Jae-sung believed would destroy them all. The conflict came to a head at a family meeting in early May, with Chelsea present because Hyunwoo insisted his wife should understand the family business. She sat silently, her hands folded over her belly, now visibly rounded despite her attempts to hide it with loose clothing, and listened as father and son argued about strategy and honor and blood. "You are weak," Hyunwoo spat at his father, his face flushed with anger and something that looked like long-suppressed resentment. "You built this empire through violence, and now you want to negotiate with dogs who would tear out our throats the moment we show softness. The Choi family needs to be eliminated, every single one of them, or they will eliminate us." "Violence is easy," Jae-sung replied, his voice dangerously calm. "Any fool can pull a trigger. True power lies in knowing when to fight and when to find another way, and you would do well to learn the difference before you get everyone in this family killed." "You mean before I get you killed?" Hyunwoo shot back. "That is what this is really about, is it not? You are afraid of dying, afraid of losing your throne, and you will sacrifice our future to protect your present." Jae-sung's expression went cold in a way that made everyone in the room tense, and when he spoke, his words cut like a blade. "I have killed more men than you have years on this earth, boy. Do not mistake my restraint for fear, and do not ever question my commitment to this family again." The meeting ended badly, with Hyunwoo storming out and slamming the door behind him, and later that night, Jae-sung came to Chelsea's room, exhausted and worried. "He is going to do something reckless," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I can feel it, and when he does, everything is going to fall apart." Chelsea took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Then we leave now," she said. "Tonight. We take our chances and run before it is too late." But Jae-sung shook his head. "If we run, he will hunt us to the ends of the earth, and he will kill everyone we have ever loved to hurt us. The only way you survive this is if I can find a way to neutralize him, to strip away his power before he learns the truth." "And how do you plan to do that?" Chelsea asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Jae-sung's eyes met hers, and in their depths, she saw a determination that bordered on madness. "By challenging him for leadership of the family," he said. by forcing the other families to choose between his recklessness and my experience, and by doing whatever it takes to protect you and our child. It was a declaration of war, and they both knew it. The breaking point came 3 days later, when Hyunwoo made his move. Without his father's approval, he ordered a strike on a Choi warehouse, a brutal assault that left 15 people dead and triggered an immediate retaliation. The Choi family hit back hard, targeting park businesses across Seoul, and within 24 hours, the city was drowning in blood and fire. Jae-sung was furious, and for the first time since Chelsea had known him, she saw the monster he had been in his youth, the ruthless killer who had carved out an empire through sheer will and violence. He called an emergency meeting of the family's top lieutenants, and in front of everyone, he stripped Hyunwoo of his command, reassuming direct control of operations and ordering an immediate ceasefire. Hyunwoo's humiliation was complete, and the hatred in his eyes when he looked at his father promised that this betrayal would not be forgotten or forgiven. That night, as Seoul burned and the sound of sirens filled the air, Jung-hwa made his play. He went to Hyunwoo with the truth about Chelsea and Jae-sung, presenting evidence he had been collecting for weeks, photographs, recordings, testimony from servants who had seen them together. He laid it all out like cards on a table, and then he sat back and watched as Hyunwoo's world shattered. The rage that consumed Hyunwoo was unlike anything Chelsea could have imagined. He tore through the mansion like a storm, smashing furniture, screaming accusations, and when he finally found Chelsea in her room, his hands were shaking with barely controlled fury. "Is it true?" he demanded, and his voice was so cold it burned. "Is that bastard growing in your belly my father's child?" Chelsea wanted to lie, wanted to deny everything, but she was tired of running, tired of hiding, and something in her snapped. "Yes," she said, lifting her chin in defiance. "Yes, it is his child, and I am not sorry, because he loves me in ways you never could." The slap came so fast she did not have time to react, and she fell to the floor, tasting blood, her ears ringing. Hyunwoo stood over her, his face twisted with hatred, and when he spoke, his words were a death sentence. "You are both dead," he said. "Do you understand me? I am going to kill you, and I am going to kill him, and I am going to burn everything he has ever built to the ground." He would have done it right then, would have strangled her with his bare hands, but Jae-sung burst into the room, having heard the commotion, and the two men collided like titans, violence erupting between them with a ferocity that shook the walls. Chelsea scrambled away, clutching her belly, watching in horror as father and son tried to murder each other, and in that moment, she realized that her love for Jae-sung had destroyed everything, that there was no happy ending waiting for them, only blood and sorrow and death. The fight ended when Jae-sung's guards pulled them apart, and Hyunwoo was dragged from the room, screaming threats and promises of vengeance. Jae-sung immediately ordered Chelsea moved to a safe house, a penthouse in Gangnam owned through shell companies, and he stationed his most loyal soldiers around her with instructions to shoot anyone who tried to get close. "This is not over," he told her before he left, his face bruised and blooded. "Hyunwoo will come for us, and when he does, I need you to be ready to run. Promise me that if I tell you to leave, you will not argue, you will just go." "I am not leaving you," Chelsea said, tears streaming down her face. "You will if I ask you to," Jae-sung replied. "Because that baby you are carrying is everything to me, and I will die 1,000 times over to make sure both of you survive this." It was the closest thing to a goodbye they would get. The war between father and son tore the Park family apart from the inside out. Loyalties fractured along generational lines, with older members supporting Jae-sung's experience and younger ones rallying behind Hyunwoo's vision of aggressive expansion. What had been a unified crime empire became two competing factions, each preparing for the inevitable confrontation that would decide the family's future. Hyunwoo made his intentions clear by targeting everything his father had built, systematically destroying businesses, turning allies into enemies, and offering deals to rival families that would have been unthinkable months earlier. He was willing to burn the entire organization to ash if it meant destroying Jae-sung and Chelsea, and as the violence escalated, Seoul transformed into a war zone, with bodies piling up on both sides. Chelsea remained trapped in the penthouse, a prisoner in all but name, watching the city burn from her window and feeling the weight of her guilt crushing her chest. She had done this, had set this catastrophe in motion with her selfishness and her inability to resist what she knew was forbidden, and now good people were dying because of her choices. Jae-sung visited when he could, always looking more exhausted, more worn down, as if the war was aging him a decade with every passing day. He would hold Chelsea, press his hand to her belly to feel their child kick, and for a few precious moments, they could pretend they were just a couple expecting their first baby, not two people responsible for tearing a criminal empire apart. "Do you regret it?" Chelsea asked him one night, as they lay tangled together in her bed, surrounded by the sound of distant gunfire. Do you wish you had never touched me, never fallen in love with me? Jae-sung was quiet for a long time, and when he finally answered, his voice was raw with emotion. I regret that loving you has caused you pain, he said. I regret that my son hates you, that you are in danger, that our child will be born into this nightmare. But I do not regret loving you, Chelsea. I will never regret that, not even if it costs me everything. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her, and it broke her heart. The final confrontation came in early June, when Hyun-woo discovered the location of Chelsea's safe house through a traitor in his father's ranks. He assembled a team of his best soldiers, men who were loyal to him personally, and he planned an assault designed to kill everyone inside, to erase Chelsea and the unborn child from existence. But Jung-woo, playing both sides as he always had, warned Jae-sung hours before the attack, and the old patriarch made a decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered his guards to evacuate Chelsea to a backup location, a house near the coast where a boat was waiting to take her to Japan, and then he stayed behind with a handful of his most trusted men to face his son. Chelsea refused to go. I am not leaving you to die, she screamed, fighting against the guards who were trying to physically carry her out. I am not running while you sacrifice yourself for me. You are carrying our child, Jae-sung said, his voice firm but his eyes pleading. If you die, everything I have done, every choice I have made, becomes meaningless. Please, Chelsea, I am begging you, let me do this one thing right. Let me protect you the only way I know how. She wanted to stay, wanted to fight beside him, but she knew he was right, knew that their baby deserved a chance to live even if they did not. So she let the guards lead her away, sobbing so hard she could barely see, her heart shattering into pieces that she knew would never fit back together. The battle that followed was brutal and short. Hyun-woo's forces stormed the penthouse with military precision, but Jae-sung had prepared for this moment, had turned the space into a fortress, and he made his son pay for every inch of ground in blood. The fighting was vicious, close-quarters combat that left the luxurious penthouse looking like a slaughterhouse, and through it all, Jae-sung fought with the skill and fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. He killed 7 of Hyun-woo's soldiers before they overwhelmed him through sheer numbers, and even then, he did not surrender, did not beg for mercy. When Hyun-woo finally stood over him, his gun pointed at his father's head, Jae-sung simply smiled, blood running down his face, and said, You have already lost, boy. She is gone, and our child is beyond your reach, and you will spend the rest of your miserable life knowing that I took from you the only thing you ever truly valued, your pride. The gunshot echoed through the penthouse, and Park Jae-sung, patriarch of one of Korea's most powerful crime families, died with Chelsea's name on his lips and her face in his mind. But Hyun-woo's victory was hollow. By the time he realized his father had outsmarted him, that Chelsea was long gone, the other families had seen enough. The war had cost them too much money, too much blood, and they no longer trusted Hyun-woo's judgment. Within days, he was deposed, stripped of his position and exiled from Seoul, sent to oversee minor operations in Busan where he could do no more damage. Jung-woo assumed control of the Park family, and his first act as the new patriarch was to declare Chelsea and her unborn child untouchable, protected by blood law that no one could violate without facing the wrath of the entire organization. It was a mercy Chelsea had not expected, though she suspected it had less to do with kindness and more to do with Jung-woo's sense of irony. He had always enjoyed complicated games. Chelsea made it to Japan, where Jae-sung's contacts helped her disappear into the sprawling anonymity of Tokyo. She gave birth 3 months later to a baby girl with her brown skin and her father's dark eyes, and she named her Jae-hee, a tribute to the man who had died protecting them both. The grief nearly destroyed her. There were days when Chelsea could barely get out of bed, when the weight of her loss felt like it was physically crushing her chest, when she looked at her daughter and saw only the man she would never hold again. But slowly, painfully, she learned to live with the absence, to carry her sorrow like a scar that would never fully heal but that eventually stopped bleeding. She never returned to Korea. The risk was too great, even with Jung-woo's protection, and she had no desire to see the country that had taken everything from her. Instead, she built a new life in Japan, working as a translator, raising her daughter, and trying to forget the love affair that had cost so much. But she never forgot Jae-sung. How could she, when every time she looked at Jae-hee, she saw him staring back at her? She told her daughter stories about her father as she grew older, carefully edited versions that emphasized his love and his bravery while leaving out the darkness and the violence. Jae-hee grew up knowing she was the product of a great love, a forbidden passion that had burned so brightly it had consumed everything around it, and she carried that knowledge with a quiet pride that reminded Chelsea so much of her father it hurt. Years passed, and the acute pain of loss gradually transformed into a dull ache, a permanent presence that Chelsea learned to live with. She dated occasionally, but no one could compare to Jae-sung, No one could make her feel the way he had, and eventually, she stopped trying to replace what could never be replaced. On the 5th anniversary of his death, Chelsea received a package with no return address. Inside was a letter in Jae-sung's handwriting, written before the final battle, and a USB drive containing hours of video messages he had recorded for her and for the daughter he would never meet. Chelsea spent an entire night watching them, sobbing as he told stories, offered advice, and repeatedly declared his love for them both, and by the time the sun rose, she felt something she had not felt in years: peace. Jae-sung had known he was going to die, had accepted it, and his final gift to her was the reassurance that he had no regrets, that loving her had been worth every consequence, that she should not waste her life mourning him but should instead live fully and completely for herself and for their child. "Be happy, Chelsea," he said in the final video, his eyes looking directly into the camera as if he could see her across time and death. "That is all I want for you. Be happy, love our daughter, and know that whatever comes after this life, I will be waiting for you with open arms." It was the permission she had not realized she needed, and slowly, carefully, Chelsea began to heal. 8 years after Jae-sung's death, Hyun-woo died in a car accident in Busan, drunk and alone, his life having spiraled into bitterness and self-destruction. Jung-hwa sent Chelsea a message informing her of her former husband's death and formally releasing her from any remaining ties to the Park family. She was free, truly free, for the first time since she had stepped foot in Korea. Chelsea never remarried, never found another great love, but she learned to be content with the life she had built, with the beautiful, brilliant daughter who brought her joy every day, and with the memories of a man who had loved her so completely he had been willing to destroy everything for her. Sometimes, late at night, when Jae-hee was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Chelsea would look at the picture she kept hidden in her drawer, the only photograph she had of Jae-sung, stolen from his study before she fled Korea, and she would whisper her gratitude and her love into the darkness, hoping that somehow, somewhere, he could hear her. Their love had been forbidden, dangerous, and ultimately tragic, but it had also been real, and in a world as cruel and cold as theirs had been, that realness was worth everything they had paid for it. Chelsea died at 73, surrounded by her daughter and her 2 grandchildren, and her last words were in Korean, a language she had not spoken in decades. "I am coming, my love," she whispered, and then she closed her eyes and let go, hoping that Jae-sung had been right, that he was waiting for her somewhere beyond the pain and the grief, ready to hold her again. And if there was any justice in the universe, any mercy for 2 people who had loved too much and too dangerously, then he was. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I know it was a difficult journey, filled with heartbreak and impossible choices. I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Chelsea and Jae-sung were wrong for falling in love, or do you believe that some loves are worth any price? Who was your favorite character, and do you think Chelsea made the right choice by running? Leave your answers in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe if you have not already, and share this story with anyone who loves dramatic romance. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember that love, even when it destroys us, is always worth fighting for.